FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum. We are coming to you live from the Central Building, the home of Radio 1 FM 90, but we're also broadcasting live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. You click on the icon with the word Listen Live. Now, this radio station is also live on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. On Star Times, our audio channel is 97. And we are also on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores with your smartphone. Download any, look for Radio 1 FM 90. And as long as you have an internet connection, you should be able to listen to this radio station. There are two ways to contribute to our discussion. One of the ways is to share a message using the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. The other one is to call in. Time allowing, I'll open the phone lines for you to actually interact with the guests who are here in studio. Today we'll be looking at the leadership question in Africa, borrowing lessons from the recent election process in the Senegal. Now, over the weekend, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, a 44-year-old, was voted as president of Senegal in what has been hailed as a democratic process that reflects the will of the people. Now, he defeated the prime minister in the outgoing government. The new president had just been released from prison 10 days ago to contest as the incumbent Macky Sall exited power after serving his 2 terms. The West African region was also dominated recently by military coups against leaders who had become unpopular, according to the coup plotters. Among the key issues that the new President Faye has announced is a total review of all agreements with France, the former colonial master of that country. This is the same stance that has been taken by most young leaders who have captured power in the region. Now, political analysts say that a peaceful and democratic process in Senegal is a ray of hope that should be emulated by other countries that are preparing for elections. Back in Uganda, on the leadership question, there are debates ongoing about the quality of leaders we have. And most people say we have a problem grooming leaders are fractured and also weak, not only in terms of form, but disorganized in many aspects. So we'll be asking this evening, what lessons can other African countries take from the election process that has been in Senegal? What do we need to do as a country, as Uganda generally, to improve on our situation? I have 2 guests in studio. The Honorable Francis Babu is a former minister and legislator. He's also among the senior political elders in the ruling NRM party. Good evening, Honorable Babu, and thank you very much for making time to be with us this evening.
Well, good evening. And, when I was in Tanzania, I learned that we should greet our leaders. They say, Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And they say, Yesu asifiwe. Yesu atenderezebwe. It's a very nice that people come and listen. Now, right now as we talk, our brethren, the Muslims, are opening their fast. It's Futari now. And it's very important that we wish them a very good evening and wish everybody the evening throughout the country. You brought a very good topic. I'd like to thank you very much. We'd like to greet everybody who is listening this evening. And, of course, we'd like to congratulate this young gentleman. He's 44 years old. He's not young, he's a man. And he is Bassirou Diomaye Faye. He's 44 years of age. He had been working with their tax collection center, like URA. He's very well educated. He gave us his speech in English, which was very, very impressive. And it made me wake up to remember what the history of Africa has been. The French, Spanish, and the Portuguese used to do what they call a direct rule. And they trained the people in their colonies to become Frenchmen. Assimilation. Trained them, took them to their universities. And the first leaders of Africa were actually put there by the Frenchmen, like Senghor, who was also a member of parliament in France, Houphouët-Boigny, people like Sékou Touré, and a few others. So during independence, these people were made the leaders of those countries. And one of them became revolutionary when he became friendly to Nkrumah. That is Sékou Touré. Now, Sékou Touré wanted the French to leave This was independence. And what the French did in Guinea, Conakry, was very unfortunate. They took even the electricity lines were removed, telephones were removed, all sorts of things were done. Now that showed you the kind of callousness of the French people. The French people ruled those countries by putting their leaders. The leaders were groomed in France. They believed in France. They created one central bank, the CFA, and it was based in France. In other words, the Frenchmen called the shots.
So we had France in Africa.
Yes. Now, France, one thing, this direct rule, they thought was in favor for them. But what has happened, because of this kind of rule, there's a window which they never knew would open. The younger generation that were coming out of these leaders they had created. These leaders sent their children to France, to America, to where, in fact, the Senegalese in Africa have got a big diaspora group than any other African country.
All right.
They work into the West. Now, a lot of these kids have been trained in those places. They have understood the Frenchman. They have understood how he behaves. So what is happening now, the results of that is this election.
All right.
Now you are seeing this happening in Senegal, in Conakry, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger and Chad. These are the same. And this is the kind of reaction coming out of that direct rule which the Frenchmen started.
All right. The second guest, Mr. Henry Kasacha, OHTWA, the Executive Director at the Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Kasacha.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and good evening, our listeners.
All right.
I'm happy to be here.
The Honorable Babu has given us a preview, his opening remarks, his thoughts about what is happening in West Africa. Let's hear from you. I'm sure you're familiar with the news in Senegal, the election. Somebody comes out of jail 10 days into the campaign process, and they are elected unanimously as president at the age of 44.
Well, you see, one is that the campaign would not have changed anything. Many people are tired. Many people have made up their mind to vote out their governments. So even if he has come out 10 days to the election, his going around the country did not have any impact. People make decisions to whom to vote way through, before even nominations. So even if this man was in jail and he was on the ballot paper, they were likely to vote for him. You could only stop him by not voting for him. So I think that the 10 days to election is that in many of our countries where people are going through difficult economic times, they have turned against the current governments because they have failed to deliver. And people make up their decisions to vote out the government even before elections are called. Unless the elections are tampered with, many times the people vote out their sitting governments. So what we see in West Africa now is this. It's not magic. It's because it was his time, he was the candidate, and people had seen him, they had identified with him, he had been imprisoned for whatever reasons, and the people had decided to vote out the current government.
Surprisingly, his colleague, who was supposed actually to be the front runner, the main opposition candidate, had been jailed, convicted, and under that conviction, he was barred from running for elective office. So his friend takes on the mantle.
I mean, we had this when Senegal was jailed in America. The late Senegal was jailed in America. And the way the late John Sebanakis came up, that our man has been jailed, next in command should take over. So it will happen if people have taken a position on an issue.
So it's about the people.
If the people have taken a position to vote out this government and they believe that you are the candidate who's going to take us through, it is up to the organization that was fronting that person to front one person. It happened here. We have seen it here happening. When so-and-so is out of the race, you remember when Haji Alagide, as soon as Haji was kicked out of the nomination process, he was like Mulonde Wesiji. And then we had the whole position of Haji Alagide. So when the people have taken a decision, when people have said you should go, we just need a flag bearer to take us through. So even his friend or his wife, I mean, it also happened in many of these countries, even in Uganda here. This is why we have people fronting their children in the by-elections. because people believe that the voters still have that sympathy towards the family, and they will just sympathize and vote for the daughter or the son. It has happened sometimes. So what we see is that when the people have taken a position, regardless of what trickery you make, they will definitely put their position across.
All right. Honorable Babu, you raise a very important issue about preparing people who will become leaders. And wherever you discuss issues of leadership, politics, you hear that there is a deep gap in terms of preparing leaders, grooming leaders, responsible people to provide leadership in most of the African countries. Using the Senegalese example, what is missing in these other African countries that we can emulate?
I want to put one point very clear.
Please.
That actually the man who was in jail with Bazero here was actually called Sonko.
Sonko, yeah.
Sonko had stood for elections before. And this gentleman, the one who was won, was his secretary. And they worked together. So they had been known already that they had a party.
They were organized.
And they had already campaigned. So when it came to the election, these 10 days you're talking about, they had already been campaigning. So these 10 days actually increased their popularity. So the whole point that I want us to make, this kind of leadership we're talking about and the kind of class is extremely important. A lot of our people here are trained in our universities are fantastic. We produce very good degrees, but it's not for leadership. Most of them are workers. Most of them are technocrats. Most of them are technical people. We are looking for leaders, and leaders come from different. Leaders emerge. They don't just you don't create them. They emerge out of certain areas. These people think that when you go to Makerere and you say the poor students have been elected, that's not politics. Politics is a little bit more than that. When I had this new elected, the president-elect speak in English, I was extremely impressed. He had it all together. He understood what he was talking about. He had leadership qualities. Now, when I listen to some of our people talk, I don't see those leadership qualities. I see people who has done a little bit of theory about politics, and he thinks he knows it all. Now, this is where the problem is. Now, when he spoke yesterday, he said, I appeal to the youth, the elite, and the diaspora. Three things. Look, he brings in the elite because he knows a lot of these people, the elder people, are among the elite. They are parents. So he knows that these people are there. So he did not create a dichotomy. And another thing that he said, we are going to review the corruption in this country by reviewing all the contracts of minerals and so on and so forth. And the other thing that he talked about, there are some people in France, the French public has woken up to support us. They speak like me. Meaning that he has understood that the French people are supporting the Africans of what is going on now in those countries I mentioned. Now, I am a little bit surprised that African leaders have not realized that thing has a lot of meaning. That actually we have not, as African, trained good leaders. The only places where we can train leaders in this part of the world is in the army, where they train them as leaders, and in churches or religious organizations. If you look at some of these church leaders, the way they are trained, they have a certain level of leadership. Now, that's the leadership we're looking for.
They are taught to lead from the front.
Some years ago, I was talking to a certain sheikh here. I said, how do you see the difference between it? He says the difference between our religions. The Catholic religion trains their people to a very high level in terms of leadership. So they handle things in a different way.
And there is even a hierarchy.
There's a hierarchy. So he was trying to explain leadership. Now, a lot of leadership is extremely important in what we are doing today. How do we get them trained? How do we get them to understand? Now, the French have got certain revolutionary qualities. Remember, the French Revolution. Remember, Charles de Gaulle after Second World War. The revolution he brought. He went to Canada and says, "Viva libre Quebec." He wanted the Quebec people wanted to be isolated from the Canadian system. So The whole point is the French have got this idea, and they, although they have it in their country, they don't export it. But these young people have been there, they have seen it, they know what it is, and therefore it has created leadership qualities in them. Once you have a thing like Viva Uganda Libre, it means you are patriotic. It means free. Uganda should be free and should be liberated. The question is, since we got in, is Uganda liberated? Is Uganda liberated, really? Are we free? Now, how do we become leaders if we don't understand those two words? Free, liberated, and patriotic. How? Most of our leaders I see, when they go into this one, they are thinking about power of money. Now, power of money is not leadership. Some people actually believe that there are so many power. One power is political, the other power is economy. That is yes and no. You've got to first to have, you've got to have the qualities of being a leader, loving your country to an extent that you want it to be free, you want it to be liberated, and you want the country. Yeah? You want the country to be, that members are patriotic. Therefore, you as a leader, a good leader, is one who makes other leaders.
So you're saying there's a difference between a politician and a leader? Because
yes.
What you're saying there is exactly what the politicians tell us.
No. That's a mistake
and
also.
Then
Please.
There is that strong belief that these people actually love their country.
The word politician has been bastardized. The word politician means management of society. A politician is managing society. A leader leads in that society. But the politics is the science of managing society. So when you hear these people spoiling the word politician, they're wrong. Here you're talking about callousness. You're talking about greed. You're talking about corruption. That's not politics. No. Politics is the management of society. Politics is the respect of society. And a good leader is the one who creates other leaders. You just imagine, right from the president, if everybody below the president all the way to the village were leaders, they would do the things the way they're supposed to be done. That is a leader. A leader is the one who exudes that charisma which pulls others and they follow where they're going. And these are extremely important. The problem is, who do we have who has created that so that we can he becomes like a magnet and we all follow.
All right.
What I see are people looking for economic power.
All right. Mr. Kasacha, do you agree with the analysis of Honorable Babu that in Uganda we have people who are posing as leaders? They are greedy, looking for money, more preoccupied with power, but even the power that they are looking for is for enriching themselves.
Well, you see, there are some leaders in this country, and those leaders are making serious sacrifices for this country. And some of them are very frustrated by what they see, including their colleagues who you're serving with. And you think that you are all about leading and developing this country, yet other people are focused on totally different things. And the true intentions of leaders can only be seen from the decisions they make. You know, to be a leader, you don't have to profess that I'm a leader. You don't have to speak and have anointment of leadership. It is the decisions that you make. It is the opportunity that you use with the power you have. Because that decision of saying we are going to fund primary education, we are going to fund healthcare, we are going to fund this, as opposed to we are going to provide facilitation for our travels, for this and that, those are the decisions that demonstrate leadership. Now, a leader will be able to have a vision of the society they want. When they go to a village and they see poverty, they will be touched by that poverty. And all the decisions they will be making will be in relation to transforming that society. Now, if you see leaders who are bent on benchmarking on where other people are getting more money, then the motivation for leadership has changed. You see, the fundamental question is, what motivates our people from running for elections? When we had just gone into elections here, those who were around who remember, people would even step down as LC1 chairperson. They would nominate you, Kenneth, for a village chairperson, you thank the village and you say, I step down. I cannot be a village chairperson because this position requires more than what I have, more than what I can offer. Today, everybody is running to become a chairperson. Today, everybody is running for election. If you only suspended these academic qualifications, the Electoral Commission will be overwhelmed by the candidates who run for parliament. Why? Because the material benefits that are attached to these offices have become the major motivating factors. That's why people are spending so much money. I mean, why would you spend so much money to become a village LC1 chairperson? Why would you spend so much money to become a district councillor? When you're going to sit quarterly and you're only given an allowance, how are you going to recover that money? Apart from thinking that when I get into the council, I will influence the contracts committee, I will have this, and have. That's why corruption continues. People are borrowing money, they are investing so much. So the motivation for running for elective office now has become more material. And those leaders who are really interested in transforming this country will always have the minority vote. When people are allocating money, when people are making budgets, their say people will not listen to you. You go to parliament, if you have the opportunity and you talk to parliamentarians, some will tell you, we are not interested in that. We are looking at the next election, we need more money. So if you need more money, you're not bothered by the poverty in your constituency. So it would be that leadership will be demonstrated on what decisions people make, how you use the power you have. And that is the test of leadership. Leaders who sacrifice, I mean, all the great leaders have sacrificed. All the great leaders have diverted government resources to go and create an impact. I mean, we are looking at Magufuli. Magufuli was in Tanzania for how many years? For 6 years. Just 5 years. But you go to Tanzania today and you see and they tell you this is Magufuli, this is Magufuli, this is Magufuli. Why? Because he had been in government for so long. He had seen how decisions were being made. And he knew that the bottom line lies with the president. And Magufuli said, if I become the president, this has to change. And indeed, he was president for just over 5 years, and Tanzania changed. So it is the decisions that we make that will define us.
All right.
But the decisions will be informed by our ideas about society. A person, you see, the problem we have in this country is we have got so many mobilizers and turned them into leaders. A mobilizer just mobilizes people. Kunga bantu bajewanu, kunga. When they gather, you have nothing to tell them. You can't challenge them. Then you begin responding. You say, a mobilizer will tell you, bagala kusente, bagala kuchino, kusente. But a leader will tell them, you don't need money, you need to work, we need to do this. So, the idea that we have, the challenge we have in this society of ours, because of opening up elective politics to everybody, we have seen so many mobilizers joining leadership positions, from LC1 to government. There are people in government who are in executive, who are mobilizers, typical mobilizers, but they are in leadership positions. So how would you expect a mobilizer to lead? Impossible. And eventually, in difficult times, they will say, we are waiting for the president to tell us what to do. We are waiting for so and so. Even in a political party, even in a village, if you have a mobilizer, I have worked with politicians. Somebody mobilizes a hall, it is full and you are on the way. You have not yet, you still have 60 kilometers. They call you, where are you? People are already here, they are getting tired. Say, please engage them on the issues we are standing for. I cannot engage them. My role was to bring them together, to convince them to come to the hall.
Doesn't that point to a fact that probably the political vehicles we are looking at, political parties, do not have a firm ground where they stand? They do not understand the challenges that the country faces, because then that group should be able to articulate the issues, even in the area where they are gathered.
Yeah, you see, the fact that motivation is material. People are joining political parties to get flags, not because they share a common idea. If you can get a flag and you can win this election, why don't you join these people? So that, you see, we also think that people in charge of the political parties know how to run political parties. Some of them, because politics now demands that you must be in a political party. And then you are popular and you are elected Secretary General. You are popular but you don't know what it means to be a Secretary General of a political party.
All right. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to go for a break. When we return, in the middle there's a very important aspect, the people. You can't provide good leadership in a country where people do not understand also what they need, because eventually, beyond the challenges that we have in electoral systems, the people decide who should become the leader. Are our people, the voters, aware? Are they well prepared to vote for issues than merely figureheads who sometimes do not provide the good leadership that the country deserves? Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at the leadership question in Africa, trying to get lessons from Senegal, where 44-year-old Bassirou Diomaye Faye was elected president, replacing the outgoing president Macky Sall, who has left after serving his 2 terms in office. My guest this evening, the Honorable Francis Babu and Mr. Henry Kasacha, already here in studio, and we encourage you to share your views with us. Use the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. How can we deal with a leadership question in our country? Honorable Babu,
yes.
Like I said before we went for the break, Mr. Kasacha has shared his view on the political parties because of the explanation he gave about gathering people, and then you do not have what to tell them, how to actually give them a sense of direction, which is also a good attribute of leadership, tackling the issues that are affecting people. One, are our political parties, the political vehicles that are coming up, ready to provide solutions to the challenges we are facing? But also, how about the population that eventually goes to the polls to vote for these leaders? Do they understand what they are voting for?
Well, one point that we've got to be very, very clear about is that what you're talking about are the symptoms of something bigger. Because what he's describing is the symptom of something that is slightly bigger than what we're talking about. On the top of the whole thing is the model of systems that we have copied from the West that we are trying to implement. When you talked about the democracy here, the democracy is coming from a state that is capitalistic. Right? A capitalistic state has got a democracy which requires a certain amount of money. I will come to that as we go on. In fact, the elections in America, in my opinion, are more of a profit-oriented motive. It's the people who want to make money that support elections. Well, I'll get there. If we go back, the people who came to colonize Africa, let's say this, a span of about 70 to 80 years. When they came here, they found we had a system in our countries. They ruled us using those systems. They never taught us their systems. When they were going at independence, they automatically wanted us to become their system. They wanted us to follow the Westminster system, for example, in case of Uganda. The Westminster system required multi-parties. The parties in Britain were formed on a different foundation. Foundation starting from the Magna Carta onwards, that brought about their parliament and eventually parties that were liberal and somewhere were for workers. So after the French Revolution and after the Industrial Revolution and French Revolution, you eventually now get the rich and the poor forming parties. So you had the landlords, and then you had the peasants who were on the land. You had the manufacturers and their workers, and parties came from this. In fact, the Communist Party came from the workers. So if you go on following these models, they brought them to Africa. A party in Britain is supposed to give two things. One, it's supposed to give you a program, which is the manifesto, and it's supposed to give you leaders. In other words, it goes and looks for good leaders who now come to become leaders in the system. And they go to universities, they go to different places, they follow these people, and they get them into their parties. What I'm trying to say here is that most of the Africa, like he has described to you, there's a tendency that people who make a lot of noise and they are called mobilizers, they eventually become the leaders. Because we don't have the actual leader. The parties do not give us very good leaders. Now, Nyerere, and this is the point I want to make to you, when Nyerere became the president or prime minister of Tanzania, he told us here, he came to visit here when he had stopped being a president, and said he only had 8 graduates from the university. What did he do? Realizing the population was at a certain level, he got a vice president who was a teacher, a man called His Excellency Rashid Kawawa. And these people said, now we have somebody who looks like us. So he got there, and then he realized Tanzania was so vast, 102 tribes. It was big. And then he looked for a word that would unite them. So he got the word Ujamaa, Undugu, and the language, Swahili. And he united Tanzania on those 3. Now the question for you here, have you united this country? So that you have a foundation. Is Uganda united? And these are the kind of questions that we should be asking ourselves. So what you are getting is a failure to have a foundation on which political class can work, where the foundation has got also hierarchy and has also got some sort of discipline in leadership. So the models we are following are having a problem. A lot of people who are coming they are using the Western style, where Obama goes for elections and spends millions and millions of dollars, which are collected from people who have got private companies, which are profit-orientated. And therefore, even the man they are supporting becomes profit-orientated because he has to support them after the elections. So the whole thing is we have to sit down as Africans. Look at our country. Can we afford this system? Can this system work in a poor country like ours?
What would be the option?
There are many options we can find. Unfortunately, a man like Lee Kuan Yew brought it, and they called him a modern dictator. So we need to find a system that can help this country to move forward. And that system, we have to go back and say, wait a minute, how do we get leaders? How did you get leaders before the white man came here? What was the system? Was that system good? Is the system of the white man he brought here good? Do we have another system we could use? We have to sit down, and here we don't need simple minds. We need people who are really serious. They look at our culture. They look how we can unite this country. Luckily, this country is very lucky. Most of our culture is virtually the same, starting from the Bunyoro kingdom and the other kingdoms and the chiefdoms and all the other African leaders. We have to find out how we can get them to unite this country. Once we are united, we now form a foundation on which we can now say, how do you form your party? I do not form a party because I want to remove him from politics. I form a party because I've got a program and I've got good leaders. Now, this is what we need. We need to sit down and review what we should do for our country by looking, even if you want to continue with this system, you can it's virtually like a broken engine, but you go with it. Meanwhile, you build that system of getting good leaders. You see that everybody who comes to this country is looking for a job. The people who are actually taking all the good leaders is the army, which takes them for training as leaders, take them to West Point, take them to Sandhurst, train them to senior officers' schools. The leaders of the church are taken to different levels. You find them with PhDs and they're leaders. So we need to sit down and say, if it can be done in a religious organization, if it can be done in the army, what can we do? By the way, most of the management came from the army. Strategies came from the army. The question is, how do we get our people trained? Do we go back and copy the British way they used to do, that everybody who leaves school must first serve in the army so that they can get this leadership quality? What do we do? During the youth program, So we need to sit down and very seriously think about leadership in this country.
All right. Honorable Babu has tackled that issue of leadership, broadly speaking, from the angle of political parties and how we can actually groom leaders. But let's now look at we, the citizens. Do we understand actually what we are voting for as we decide who should become our leader?
Well, I think the people understand.
Yes.
The people understand. And it's the leaders who sometimes fail to explain to the people. It's the leaders who lack what to tell the people. It's the leaders who lack the courage to tell people the right thing.
The truth.
If leaders do not have that political courage to tell people that we cannot have this, to tell people that you must respect this one, to tell people that this is not acceptable, we are not, it's the leadership that fails.
Mr. Kasacha, when we go for political campaigns, do we actually have a situation where people vote for issues other than leaders? I'm bringing in the aspect of individual merit, where the individuals seem to supersede the issues at play.
You see,
we have seen people with good manifestos, but they are not the ones who are elected.
You see, our between the voters
It's a vehicle.
and the leaders. If you look at the material of campaign in the 1960s, people are just putting vote UPC. The name Babu will be somewhere very far. But now people say vote Babu, then NRM is somewhere in the corner. Vote Chagulanyi, then Nupu is somewhere in the corner. Vote so and so. So the political party should play a linkage role, because the voters do not have the ability to screen the people you are presenting. So the party must have a screening process to present the right people who believe in their ideas, who stand for their values. Now, the challenge we have in Uganda is because of the individual merit. It is the politician who plays the linkage role to the political party. It is the individual who links the voter to the party.
The individual owns the political party, but it's not the political party that owns the individual.
Actually, not, because you see, the people have their own allegiance to their own son. Remember when we had the Honorable Betty Kamya before she left FDC? She had problems in FDC, and she demobilized the whole of Uganda region because she had not been accommodated. So FDC could not proceed because Betty Kamya had pulled out. Now we have so many leaders here. You touch them, the entire region goes. Why? Because they know their son more than the political party. People know President Museveni more than the NRM. If he stood here and the NRM is that side, everybody will say Fetuliku Jaja, and the NRM will be left empty. People may know Chagulanyi more than NUP. People may know Dr. Besigye more than FDC. People will know Honorable Mao more than DP because of that linkage role. Now, the problem we have in our political system is because of the individual merit. People have known the individuals before the political parties. So it is the party that plays the linkage role. So the idea of the issues, the fundamental issues people are having is poverty, is disease, is ignorance. Those three define all the demands that you see in the elections. When they meet a candidate, they say, Numa, Sinaria. So people who have nothing to say just look for money to go and buy voters. So at the end of the day, the voter is not simply getting the money, but the voter is dealing with an issue of hunger. When somebody is hungry, it will not matter. It is you, the politician, to define his being hungry, his being poor, and defining a solution on how the state should contribute to his development. Look at healthcare. I'll give you this example.
Very quickly.
Across the country, the healthcare system is broken down. There are no ambulances. There's nothing. What leaders do is buy cars and say ambulance. Then you see their name on it and then the ambulance. Then people say this one is dealing with the problem because he has bought a car, which is actually not an ambulance because it's just a vehicle that is labeled ambulance. And
modified.
And not even modified. If you look at some of them, they even do not have the essentials of an ambulance. The issue is, when you come to parliament, instead of using your personal private money to support the state, do you think this government cannot buy these second-hand ambulances for every constituency? Why would MPs use their own personal money to buy an ambulance for 60 million? This government has resources that if they made a decision to buy an ambulance for every constituency, they can make that decision. And the issue is, it will now go back to the allocation of resources. Are we ready to support this thing? If they're going to push it, I mean, look at these vehicles. MPs are getting vehicles. How much money is that? 200 million. But you just buy 500 Land Cruisers and put them on in the parliamentary parking here. You swear you take an ambulance, a Land Cruiser key. They throw you out, you bring back the vehicle. They will not support that idea. Right. They rather get the 200 million and go with their money. So it is a question of leadership. All right.
Let's hear from the listeners who have been sharing with us. Even before we do that, Honorable Babu, as we speak here, we still have our colonial masters who are hovering over us. And I wanted to ask you, what kind of reaction are we likely to see in France because of what is happening in West Africa? But also, as we even talk about Uganda here, we still hear talk of foreigners interfering within our processes. Are we really independent? Are we really self-sufficient, like you did ask in your first segment of this discussion? You respond to that together with the comments that are coming in from the listeners. We have a comment coming from Fred. Fred says, that is Francois, who says, introduce or advocating for the return of civic or political or constitutional studies in schools, and that might help masses appreciate what being in political leadership is, and also their rights to make informed decisions about who leads them. Otherwise, too much patronage has destroyed us. If not addressed, our politics will remain a cash cow. That's Francois there with that comment, advocating for civic education in schools. We have a comment coming in from Fred. I agree and retaliate. The statement earlier said that the greatest challenge to Africa is leadership that overstays in power. That is Fred there with that comment, who thinks overstaying in power is a problem and probably justifying what you earlier said, that the problem of leadership in Africa. Should be noted that in Senegal, 2-term limits and the president is out. We have a comment coming in from Anthony, listening in from Kibuli. Good evening, Spectrum. I strongly believe that the Senegalese people have found the right person at the right time, and I also believe that one day Uganda will find the right person at the right time. But for now, we haven't seen that person. The new president of Senegal did not mobilize anything. Just this time, it seems to suggest it's only God that can help us to find the right person. That is Anthony there in Kivuli, who seems to have resigned and says only God can help us to deal with our leadership issues. Well, we have another person here who shared the first speech of the president-elect in Senegal, and I think this is the speech that Honorable Babu was talking about, where he vowed to deal with the challenges being posed by the former colonial master. We have another comment here coming in from Henry, who says, Henry has a comment here who says, thanks for the program. I like the submissions of Honorable Captain Babu. The lack of leadership in Uganda and many African countries, the deliberate move by the governments in power, especially those who want to rule forever. If you take an example of Tanzania, the decision to groom leaders and to unite the country was the deliberate move. Until we value the importance of building a nation beyond the individuals, we will remain stagnant. That's a comment there from Henry, who is listening in from Banda. We have another comment here from Pat. Pat says, Honorable Babu seems to string a narrative for hereditary leadership from the military, so one can guess what he's subliminally selling to Ugandans. Quite a clever statesman, quite a clever salesman for what is beginning to unfold before our eyes in this country. They seem to suggest that you are sort of campaigning for somebody. Then we have another comment coming in from Rogers, who says, I salute the panelists, salute Honorable Babu. I like the approach of thinking about leadership, quoting from how Tanzania and Rwanda have scaled up the leadership and development. The big question is, when do we adopt to new functional system with measurables? It is critical for Uganda to start to adopt to structured leadership and thinking as opposed to political individualism. He's listening again from PG there. Very quickly, let's first react to these comments that are coming in and see if we still have time to take in more. I'll begin with you, Honorable Francis Babu.
Oh, thank you very much. The point that I wanted to make is that to make this thing very simple, Meritocracy, we're talking about a merit of a leader. We're talking about pragmatism of a leader. Action speaks louder than words. And a leader must do something. And we are talking about honesty. Now, the last very important point I want to... Remember when we were electing the CA here? We had something called candidates meeting. It has not happened in a lot of countries, but it happened here. And the candidates would all be brought in. They would go to an area, and each one would speak. And people would gauge them.
Would weigh them.
Yeah. There was no mobilization. It was the Electoral Commission that called the people. And you came and talked to them. There was no fraternizing. There was no giving money. And people elected a CA in this country, probably one of the best. Now, after finishing that one, when I talk about merit, that's where the parties must give us leaders who have got a merit. Then when I talk about pragmatism, action speaks louder than words. And lastly, leaders must be honest. Now, my friend who was talking about the army, I'll take his comment with contempt. I'm talking about armies internationally. I'm not talking about the Uganda
You're
army.
talking about national service. I
Yes.
think. That's what you were saying.
Yeah, no. He was
citizen-
saying that I'm campaigning for the people who have been put in the army now. That's not what I was doing. I am explaining what an army does, not only here, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in America. They train leaders in the army. And the leaders are taken from the captain level to major onwards. And they're trained in actual schools. I even told you that most of the management training actually comes from the army. So my friend is taking me at a very rudimentary level and juvenile. I'm really quite high up on this one. I am talking about training leaders. I'm not talking about any particular person. So please, whoever you are, go back and wash your mouth, because that's bad way of talking. I'm talking about training a leader. Who has trained leaders? In Britain, they used to have compulsory military training. In Tanzania, they have youth training.
National service.
National service.
You must have in the armed forces.
In Nigeria,
for 2 years.
in Nigeria, they have that one. Now, I'm saying that in there, they actually give people discipline and train leaders. Now, if this man doesn't know, whoever it is, please wake up. Now, lastly, civic education, the gentleman was talking about. In our constitution, it is written very clearly that certain organizations within the government should be made to teach people civic education and teach them about politics and in the constitution and so on and so. Now, the man who said that there are people who have turned the government into a cash cow, I want to give him merits. That's exactly what it is. Now, this Faye did not come with a god. No. Sonko and Faye are highly trained people.
Public servants.
Not only public. They are trained. They are trained in France. They were trained in America. They are trained in Britain. You could even hear when the new president was speaking. Very well trained. And of course, they did not just come out of the blue. They had a party that had campaigned earlier on when Sal won. They were in the competition.
So there's some level of preparation for leadership.
Yes, there's some level. But these are groomed people and very well, Now, you talked about something which I liked very much, about poverty. And that poverty, in this democracy we are copying.
Can there be democracy with deep poverty?
With deep poverty. That's a very good question. That's why we must sit down. How do we work it out? Do we use the candidates meeting? Do we use a different approach? Do we tell our people in the civic education how to go about this? So, as far as I'm concerned, competition in this system we're having is another way of preparing people to sort of ask for money. It becomes profit-oriented and the government becomes a cash cow.
Very quickly, before I bring in Mr. Kasaja, somebody here is asking whether you were thinking about federalism as the system that we used to have in the past before colonialism. You did ask what we had here before the colonialists came and whether it worked.
No, what I'm telling you, Uganda was not created by Africans. It was created in Berlin. And by the way, Uganda used to go up to Naivasha until 1902 when they moved the borders. Kigezi was given to us by the King Leopold after they had come from Berlin as a birthday present to the Queen Victoria. So was West Nile. So, they formed a country called Uganda where the people did not form it themselves. So when they were going, they left us with a country called Uganda, which they had formed. But the people inside the country had not come together. So when you talk about federalism, is a method, is a model which used to reach the people.
All right.
Now there are three systems. There's federalism, devolution, and decentralization. If you use them effectively, they can work.
All right.
But if you use them badly, like in some countries where money goes to decentralization and then comes back, it doesn't work.
All right. Mr. Kasacha, in a few seconds, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
Fundamental is that it all depends on the formation. Our states in Africa have had a wrong foundation. The state formation in Africa was rudimentary. So has it come to the political parties. Once an organization has a problem with formation, the foundation is wrong and it can never produce results. Number two is that, yes, a federal system of governance will be the best solution for this country because we have a united country with too much centralized power in the president who is using all these powers to disadvantage the whole country. So unless we begin sharing power and face the reality that our state formation was wrong, then we have a problem.
All right, with that, we come to the end of Spectrum today. Thank you very much, my dear guests, for actually making time to have this discussion. And I think our next topic of discussion should be around the best form of governance system that we deserve as a country where we are now, since it's the point where you've ended. Well, I've been your host, Kenneth Lukwaganda. So up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Jr.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.